Hi, good Erev Shabbos, good Chodesh, a very good Friday, Erev Shabbos. We're coming into Shabbos, and it's also Rosh Chodesh Sivan, a very special day. And there have been some things that have been on my mind recently. And, I've been coming out of the mikveh, the mikveh Erev Shabbos, although I try to go to the mikveh every day. Sometimes make it, sometimes I don't. But Erev Shabbos, a little bit more time to think, not in as much of a rush, and it's a time to think about the week, time to think maybe what you could have done better over the week, what lessons were learned, things like that. It's a very special time to meditate and become aware of different things that you have to talk about, have to think about. I think about my failures this week and my successes, and everything's really ultimately a gift from God. Even the failures, there's big misunderstandings about that, what that means. But the power of tshuva and the lessons that we learn are tremendous. How we get to know ourselves if we take the time to be mindful. Now, a question that's come to my mind and that I've been blessed with insights into over the past few weeks, I've been discussing how I've been listening to pieces of lectures from Dr. Stephen Greer, a very interesting fellow. And again, I don't take what he says as gospel truth, but I am fascinated to examine someone who's presenting things in a very scientific way. He speaks a language that I understand, and it's quite interesting. And he discusses, how basically something, Rabbi Bar Tzadok, it's on a very similar method that Rabbi Bar Tzadok teaches about extraterrestrials. Is, we assume, we watch science fiction, something like Star Trek, and it's what Rabbi Bar Tzadok mentions. But I'm more of a fan of the older type of movies, especially the pretty bad ones, which I think they're so bad they're good. Sometimes the really good ones are a little pretentious, and the bad ones are just a lot of fun. A movie like Teenagers from Outer Space, or Robot Monster, or Killers from Space, and Plan 9 from Outer Space, that's already a pretty basic one. You have these type of films, and then you have the more highbrow ones, like Forbidden Planet, and This Island Earth, and The Day the Earth Stood Still, and they're all great, and I enjoy all of those movies from the 50s. But all of them basically present extraterrestrials as beings who get on a craft just as we get into a car or we get into a rocket ship, as we, how we went to the moon and things like that, in a very simple, basic way. That's really not so different than thousands of years ago getting onto a wagon, a chariot. There's really not much difference in any of these things. An airplane, a rocket ship. They're all fundamentally the same type of vehicle. However, Dr. Greer points out, and Rabbi Bar Tzadok points out, they both point out that, Rabbi Bar Tzadok says it, I think, quite wisely. He says, yes, indeed, the plurality of worlds indicates that there are forms of life everywhere. The universe is full of life. There's the Sefer Bris that talks about this. However, the plurality of worlds, the question is, well, why if there are extraterrestrial intelligences here on Earth, how do they get here? Do they get into a physical craft that's physical like our car in this dimension and travel at a speed that's less than the speed of light, to reach us? That would seem like a tremendous waste of resources. If they were just like us, just more advanced, just like how we understand ourselves to be scientifically. I'm not talking about in the realms of the spirit and religion. Why would they even care to come here? Just they're curious, just to show they could do it. And once they got here, why would they come back? Whereas there's so much more, to be said of how, meaning this assumption that this is how they operate is really impractical and unlikely. However, if there is something special about the human race, as religion claims, revealed religion claims, and this is the same, I think, among all the Abrahamic religions, if I'm not mistaken, that the purpose of creation, the purpose of the universe was for us. Excuse me. And so whatever other intelligent beings exist, they are here to serve God's purpose in relationship to the creation of humanity. That doesn't mean that there are servants. That doesn't mean that there are slaves. But that they are servants of God for an ultimate purpose, perhaps a much higher purpose than we can imagine. But the purpose of their existence is for us. That would also indicate why there's this elusive nature that's seen and unseen, because, Dr. Greer talks about disclosure. It's really nothing new. We've known about these things, meaning like how, and he says everything is hiding in plain sight. We read the holy books of just about every spiritual path, and you find references to otherworldly beings. Now, whether or not they all serve a purpose that's directly to us or not, that is a matter of debate. In general, even within religious circles. But in general, that's what's understood. But the question I really wanted to discuss is why, like Dr. Greer discusses how, and he has events where he go and he teaches how to summon these beings, how to communicate with them, how to experience them. Now, what is our now the question that I really want to discuss here is, what is our motivation in such an exercise? Why? Meaning, if as a man of faith, I can ask myself, I believe in God. The fact that God made multitudes and multitudes of different types of intelligent beings all throughout the many, many worlds, both in this physical dimension and in other dimensions, to the point where it nears infinity, except there is, of course, a finite aspect, but for our intents and purposes would be infinite, and only less infinite than God himself, who is much greater than all of his creations. But how we would interface with this would be a manner of, of infinity. Now, with that being said, what purpose do we have in seeking them out? Are we just curious? Is it a nature hike? Is it like going whale watching? Why should we interact with these beings? Why should we interact with them all the time, but why should we make ourselves aware of these interactions? I think is a better question. Why should we summon them? Why should we invite them? We do it in our liturgy. We summon and we invite various beings to join us. We have, it's controversial. Not everybody agrees with this. But we have, when we sit down to eat our Sabbath dinner, the first thing we do is we greet the angels and welcome them, invite them to join us. Why do we do that? What possible purpose does that have? I found something else that I think had an answer to that. But the fact that we do it shows that is part of our tradition. Again, some people are not happy with it. Some people disagree with it. Not everyone does it for that reason. But it's definitely part of our tradition. Another thing, though, however, that I came across was Rabbi Victor Miller, a very rationalist type of rabbi. However, someone that everyone respected, and who, meaning the Kabbalists said that he accomplished without Kabbalah the goals of Kabbalah. He accomplished without Hasidism the goals of Hasidism. Which is very true. So what's the story? So what does he say? He said, if you are just content with saying you know that God is ultimate wisdom without seeking out that wisdom, you're being lazy. Because we are obligated, by virtue of the fact that God created such a vast universe, we have an obligation as servants of God, as children of God, to seek out that wisdom. And so to go around and look at nature and find God's wisdom in that is not is what we are supposed to be doing. It's not just a nice thing to do. It's almost obligatory. It's not just a practice. It's our obligation. And so too, if there are higher beings, angels and so forth, that God created for whatever purpose, we should seek out God's wisdom in that truth. However, there are issues with this as well, because even though Dr. Greer seems to believe that they're all so good, I don't believe that it's going to be like Independence Day or War of the Worlds or something. That I don't believe. But there's a much more subtle aspect to the negative, extraterrestrial beings, or the neutral extraterrestrial beings that are not so high and good. Is that they are already terrorizing society. And that's also been known forever. That's no secret. They don't need to blow up our buildings. And they can kill us with drugs and sin and all kinds of vices. Why would they do that? Rabbi Barth talks about. But on the other hand, there are very high beings. But again, Rabbi Bartok says they're not interested in sitting and having conversation with us. And someone who is interested in sitting and having a conversation with you, you should be worried. Well, what is his motive? It's like the story we told with the Shevet Musar. So what are we doing here? So why would we be engaged in this exercise? I mean, Dr. Greer claims, to be in touch with ambassadors from other worlds and so forth. I don't see a problem with that per se, but I think we have to learn discernment. That's one thing being a Talmud Chochem teaches us. It's fascinating how Dr. Greer said something about this one ambassador figure that he photographed, that one of his colleagues photographed, one of his disciples photographed. He described him as wearing a yarmulke. Alright, these are all food for thought, but essentially we have to be aware of, there is value in gaining awareness of these other beings, and also the wisdom that they hold. These are people who are closer to God. But we have to learn who's who, because it's very easy for people who are unaware to be fooled. Meaning there do exist these angels that are closer to God, but how do we know which ones are angels and which ones are demons? And the thing is, demons are not as evil as you think, but they are still, often, they can be. It's not, the Jewish view of the demons is more like the Islamic and pre-Islamic Arabic view of the jinn than the Western Christian view of demons, which is not the classical Christian view of demons. That's maybe something to discuss for another time. What are their purpose? I think that's what's more important for us to seek out and learn. Not necessarily to commune and to communicate with these beings, to contact them more or less, although maybe yes, maybe no, but to be aware of them and find God's greatness. And find, meaning just as we find God's greatness in trees that He created, in animals and plants, and all of the wonders of the universe that we can see with the scientific lens, to be aware of these beings from other dimensions and all the things that our sages speak of them. I think that's Torah. Torah Lamda. It is Torah. It's in our Chazal. It's in the Gemara. It's in the Tanakh. It's in the Rambam, and all of these sources. Even the Rambam, who everyone says, oh, he's such a rationalist, and yet he says that each planet has its own intelligence, its own mind, its own spirit. I don't really have time. It's Erev Shabbos to get into this right now. One thing is interesting, though, is how he said, he spoke to a big theologian in the Vatican who said, angels don't need flying saucers to travel around, but the thing is that as we're going to read on Shavuos, the Bible describes them as coming in vehicles, chariots, and so forth. What's the nature of these craft? Again, Dr. Greer talks about how they are essentially created through intelligence, and they are themselves alive, and they themselves have a spirit. The thing is, everything does. The cars, trees, even rocks, everything has a spirit to it. As someone who's spiritually attuned can even feel that, and even you go to different places, even in the mundane sense. I'm not talking about visiting holy shrines, places of pilgrimage, which of course have tremendous spiritual vibe, but even when you visit a different country or even a different state of the 50 states, it's almost, to me, this is my experience, is each of the 50 states. I haven't been to all 50, but every state that I visited has a different and distinct spirituality that I experience. There's a different feeling in Pennsylvania, and in New York, in New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware. These are states I've spent some time in: Idaho, Montana, Utah, Wyoming. I've visited briefly. Places that I've been to, airports, stopovers even, Texas and Georgia, Ohio, Florida. I've spent some time. Each state has its own spirit. I feel it. Communities have their own spirit. Places have their own spirit. Alright, I'm getting too esoteric here. People are going to think I'm crazy. So too, these craft are spiritual craft, but also physical in a sense. Some of them are. Maybe not the Merkava that Yechezkel saw. It's probably much on a higher level and much more ethereal and totally not from this dimension. But the point, what I'm saying is that they're not. The Merkava is not a flying saucer. This, wrapping back to what I started off with, the Merkava is not a flying saucer that comes from another planet the way that we sent Apollo to the moon, or the way we send unmanned craft in a very normal physical way to other planets and so forth. That's not what the Merkava is. But the Merkava is something that's interdimensional. And there are many Merkavos, and not just one Merkava, but I'm just saying we can enter into Merkavos through meditation and so forth. Alright. Well, people are going to think I'm crazy. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. God bless people.